and welcome to the 14th NIH Matilda White Riley Behavioral and Social Science Honors. For 14 years, we've gathered together each spring to honor a distinguished lecturer for their extensive contributions to the field. That began with David Mechanic 14 years ago. Last year was Tony Antonucci. And this year we add Ann Case to that distinguished group of researchers who have done some excellent work in this field. And I'll leave to the Distinguished Lecturer Selection Committee to introduce Ann in more detail and her contributions and when we get to that point. For the last 5 years, we've also added to this honors program early stage investigator paper awards. So among the hundreds of applications we get each year for papers published by early stage investigators that have been published in 2020, we've selected 4 this year. And in a minute, I'll turn this over to Bill Elwood, who has led that selection committee to introduce them and moderate that part of the presentation. We also every year, of course, honor Matilda White Riley. And for those of you who don't know, first of all, oh, by the way, I'm Bill Riley. I forget to introduce myself sometimes, and no relation to Matilda White Riley. And Matilda actually came to the National Institutes of Aging in the late 70s, early 80s, and began what is now the Division of Behavioral and Social Research at the NIA. But her contributions extended well beyond NIA, and in many ways, until OBSSR was created in 1995, she essentially served as the de facto Associate Director for Behavioral and Social Sciences and essentially most of what OBSSR currently does, coordinating activities, advising the NIH leadership about behavioral and social science issues, and leading a number of initiatives, include a National Academy's report on health and behavior in the early 1980s that led to a lot of the inclusion of behavioral and social sciences into the biomedical research enterprise of the NIH. So each year we honor her and her work over the course of time at the NIH, as well as well before and well after, including training a large cadre of students who follow in her footsteps as well. So with that, I am going to turn this now over to Bill Elwood. Bill has led the selection committee for the Early Stage Investigator Paper Awards, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thanks so much, Bill. I am Bill Elwood from the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. And thanks to Bill for that great introduction. I might add that Dr. White Riley came to NIH in the 20th century when at age 68, many people would have thought of retiring. Instead, she was a tremendous force at NIH for 20 years and has a legacy that we continue to honor. 6 years ago was OBSSR's 20th anniversary, and we wanted to extend our program in recognition of those 20 years. So we looked to Dr. Riley's legacy, because at age 88, when she left NIH, again, she did not retire. She went back to her professorship at Bowdoin College, where she continued to publish and research and teach and mentor students. And so what better way to extend her legacy but to mentor early stage investigators, continued priority across our entire agency. All early stage investigators in their first 10 years of training are eligible to submit one original research article that they led on the study of behavioral and/or social phenomena relevant to health. and a committee of NIH scientists from across the agency rank the articles based on vision of research excellence that Dr. White Riley published herself quite a few years ago, but still remain pertinent. They're ranked on the paper's impact on theory and or method, integration of the individual and social systemic influences, and the integration of scientific disciplines. Our time together is limited and precious, but if you look in the chat box, you will see the link to all of our speakers' biographies. And there, if you needn't look at it now, it's also on the page in which you registered. So with no more ado, I'll simply introduce each researcher in the order that they appear on the agenda with their title and affiliations. So let's begin with Dr. Caitlin Lawrence, postdoctoral fellow in the NIH Intramural Research Program in Epidemiology with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. Caitlin?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Lawrence, and I am a postdoctoral fellow in the epidemiology branch at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. Today, I am pleased to share my work on neighborhood deprivation and epigenetic aging. Next slide, please. So as you might know, multiple studies have suggested that socioeconomic status disparities in life expectancy are increasing in the United States. For example, one such study found that among American men born in 1920, those in the highest income level lived about 5 years longer than those in the lowest. Next slide, please. By comparison, for men born 20 years later in 1940, this differential expanded to 12 years. Next slide. Socioeconomic status, or SES, is a composite measure of an individual's economic or sociological standing. This definition varies widely across the literature, but common measures include education, income, employment, and/or occupational status. Socioeconomic status can be measured at both the individual and neighborhood levels, and there's an increasing interest in how neighborhood traits play a role in our individual level health. A prominent measure of neighborhood socioeconomic status includes neighborhood deprivation, which represents an area with a high concentration of low socioeconomic households. Next slide, please. So neighborhood deprivation has been strongly linked with age-related diseases, including reduced life expectancy and cause-specific mortality. It's really important to note that these associations have been shown to be independent of individual level socioeconomic status, which suggests that there's something about our neighborhood environment that's playing a unique role in impacting our health. Potential hypothesized pathways for this link include psychological stress, environmental toxicants such as air pollution, poor health behaviors mediated through the built environment, food deserts, and reduced access to medical care. However, little is known about the biological mechanisms underlying this relationship. Next slide. There is evidence that neighborhood traits influence our biology in the literature. For example, a prominent theory is that accelerated shortening of chromosomal telomeres are a good marker of biologic aging, and these have been associated and seen in a range of age-related diseases. However, newly developed measures called epigenetic clocks have been purported to have a better predictive capability of biologic aging than existing metrics. Next slide. So epigenetic clocks, next slide, please. Okay, so these epigenetic clocks use DNA methylation, which refers to the binding of a methyl group to specific locations on the DNA strand. So specifically, we know that these bind to cytosine phosphate guanine, or CPG sites, at the 5th carbon of the cytosine. And it's important to remember DNA methylation is a normal biological process that changes with age. DNA methylation has also been recently associated with a range of environmental exposures, most prominently cigarette smoking, as well as a range of disease outcomes. And epigenetic clocks use different sets of DNA methylation at CPG sites across the genome to predict biologic age. Next slide. So the theory behind epigenetic clocks is really similar to all other biologic age predictors, and that is that they capture disease or mortality risk that's not measured by chronologic age. This is specifically estimated by differences or residuals between age predicted at by a given epigenetic clock and a person's chronologic age or expected age. And this is depicted here with the black dashed line. Next slide. So with epigenetic clocks, these residuals are called age acceleration, and they can be positive. And if they're positive, they represent an increase in disease or mortality risk. Next slide. They can also be negative, representing decreased risk. Next slide. So multiple clock methodologies have been published. However, there's no consensus in the literature on a gold standard. However, epigenetic clocks have evolved over time and can generally be grouped into two groups. The first is first generation clocks, and these were designed to be chronologic age predictors. And some of the prominent clocks in this group include the Horvath and the Hannum clock methods. There's also second generation clocks, and these kind of took it a step further to predict age-related disease and mortality predictors. Prominent clocks in this group include the PhenoAge and GrimAge. And I just wanted to highlight that only one prior study has investigated the link between neighborhood traits and these epigenetic clock measures, and no studies have assessed second generation clocks with respect to neighborhood traits. Next slide. So given the link that we know exists between neighborhood and age-related diseases, as well as the promising predictive capability of these new aging measures, we sought to evaluate the association between neighborhood deprivation and 4 prominent epigenetic clock metrics. Next slide. We used data from the SISTER study, which is a large prospective cohort comprising about 51,000 women who are living in the US. They were aged at enrollment 35 to 74, and participants had a sister with breast cancer, but did not have breast cancer themselves. And cohort enrollment occurred between 2003 and 2009. At enrollment, participants completed a computer-assisted telephone interview, which included a collection of their demographics, socioeconomic, lifestyle, residential factors, and they also provided anthropometric measures as well as a peripheral blood sample at the time of a home examination that followed enrollment. Next slide. So for this specific analysis, we used data from a case cohort sample restricted to non-Hispanic white women who had a blood sample available for use. After excluding participants with missing information and low quality DNA methylation, our final analytic sample included 2,632 participants. Next slide, please. DNA methylation in our study was measured from extracted genomic DNA from the whole blood samples that I mentioned were obtained at the home examination and analyzed using microarray chip technology. For this study, we used the gold standard at the time, which is the Infinium Human Methylation 450B chip array provided by Illumina. Next slide. To measure neighborhood deprivation, we used data from an existing index called the Area Deprivation Index from the year 2000. This index was published by Dr. Amy Kine from the University of Wisconsin, and it's a census-based socioeconomic status index that measures deprivation at the census block group level. This is important because it has a higher spatial resolution than the census tract, which is typically used to measure deprivation in other studies. So the index represents nationwide percentiles between 1 and 100, where 100 represents high deprivation. And if you look at the map, that's seen there in red. We linked this external index to participants' geocoded home exam addresses. Next slide, please. So for our statistical analyses, we estimated the mean differences and 95% confidence intervals between our neighborhood deprivation index and the 4 epigenetic clock metrics using linear regression. We weighted models for the selection into the case cohort, and each clock metric was converted into z-scores for comparability across the clocks. Next slide, please. So this is just a forest plot of our primary findings that show the mean differences and 95% confidence intervals in epigenetic age acceleration associated with the increasing quartiles of neighborhood deprivation. And our key finding was that those with the greatest neighborhood deprivation had higher epigenetic age acceleration compared to those with the lowest. This was true for Hannum, pheno age, and Grimm age, but we did not see a robust association with the Horvath clock. Next slide, please. And so interestingly, second generation clocks were shown to exhibit the strongest associations with a p-value or p-test for trend less than 0.001. And next slide. Just to give you an idea, oh, I'm sorry, go back one. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the differences that we saw for Grimm age for the highest quartile of deprivation, we saw an equivalent of a 3-month age acceleration compared to people who were in the best quartile of neighborhood deprivation. Next slide, please. So in summary, we found that second generation clocks, as a reminder, these were created for disease mortality predictors. These were highly sensitive to neighborhood deprivation, and our findings support and contribute to the existing knowledge between neighborhood deprivation and age-related diseases. I think our study adds value to the literature because it shows evidence that neighborhood deprivation is related to a specific measure of biologic change that has promising capabilities for predicting biologic age. Next slide, please. So I'd like to close with a brief discussion of some of the study limitations and some future directions that we have. If you may have noticed, we have assessed a group of non-Hispanic white women, and we have current plans right now to evaluate this same association in a more diverse sample. Our sample was also limited to participants with higher socioeconomic status. And so we have plans currently to replicate the study in a different cohort with more diverse socioeconomic status backgrounds. And finally, we looked at neighborhood deprivation broadly, but we're really interested in exploring other neighborhood factors, including green space, social vulnerability, and more minute factors comprising the neighborhood environment in relation to epigenetic aging. Next slide. So I'd like to give a big thanks to my primary mentor, Dr. Dale Sandler, as well as my collaborators listed here. Of course, the Matilda White Riley Honors Committee for this wonderful opportunity and great honor, and my funding through NIEHS. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out with my email listed here. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you so much, Caitlin. I'd like to point out, well, first, great job. Second, if anyone in our audience has questions for our ESIs, please feel free to type them into the chat box to all, if and when they can't come up, to ensure all our ESIs have equal amounts of time to present. We will have question and answers after the fourth presentation. That leads me then to Dr. Li Niu, who's a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Environmental Medicine and Public Health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Welcome, Li.
Thank you, Dr. Elwood, for the introduction. It is my great honor to receive the Early Stage Investigator Award from NIH OVSSR. Today, I will present my research investigating childhood maltreatment and sexual risk behavior trajectories among racial ethnic minority adolescents. Next slide, please. First, some study background. According to Child Protective Services, 9 in every 1,000 children were maltreated. Those rates are higher in children from low income and racial ethnic minority backgrounds. In a sample of minority adolescent girls, when asked to report on their childhood maltreatment experiences, 59% reporting having experienced some form of childhood maltreatment. Childhood maltreatment includes categories of abuse, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, as well as categories of neglect, including emotional and physical neglect. These various types of maltreatment frequently co-occur. So as much as 65% of maltreated youth reported experiencing a combination of 2 or more types of maltreatment. Childhood maltreatment have profound cognitive, psychological, and health consequences. This can manifest in risky sexual behaviors during adolescence, which is a key developmental period of sexual development and exploration. Research has linked childhood maltreatment, in particular sexual abuse, to sexual risk behaviors, including early sexual onset, unprotected sex, sex trade involvement, and multiple sexual partners. Maltreated youth can develop sexual risk behavior through biological pathways, including impaired stress response systems, early puberty, as well as psychological pathways, including attachment problems, post-traumatic stress disorder, low self-efficacy, and maladaptive coping. There is limited evidence on how maltreatment experiences contribute to trajectories of sexual risk behavior. We know that sexual risk behavior typically increase at the stage of exploration and changing relationships, and then it decreases as youth form more committed and longer-term relationships. To most people, risk behaviors are limited to adolescence. However, some maltreated youth with impaired biological and psychosocial functioning may have challenges navigating through these developmental tasks. Their sexual risk behavior may continue to increase throughout adolescence and young adulthood. Next slide, please. So in this study, I answered 2 key questions. First, what are profiles of maltreatment experiences considering types, frequency, and co-occurrence? And then, are maltreatment profiles associated with different trajectories of sexual risk behavior during adolescence? In this study, we used data from a longitudinal study of 882 adolescent girls of color attending an adolescent health clinic in New York City. Participants were between 13 to 21 years at enrollment, and they were followed every 6 months up to age 25. The majority of the participants were from racial ethnic minority backgrounds and also low-income families. For the measures, childhood maltreatment was assessed using retrospective report, using a validated child trauma questionnaire. Subscale scores were calculated for each of the 5 abuse and neglect type. Then at each study visit, participants reported on 6 sexual risk behaviors. Those include frequently assessed risk behavior, including condom use, multiple sexual partner, as well as some less frequent high-risk behaviors, such as sex under the influence of alcohol, sex in return for money, and having sexual partners 5 years or older. We included a set of covariates collected at baseline, including demographic characteristics, depression, age and menarche, and body mass index. For the analysis, we used latent profile analysis to identify maltreatment profiles. We then used multi-level growth curve models to examine how different maltreatment profiles are associated with age-based changes in sexual risk behavior from age 13 to 23 years. Next slide, please. So our study showed 4 maltreatment profiles. In this figure, the 4 profiles are shown on the x-axis. Then the y-axis shows how high each profile or scored on each of the 5 abuse and neglect subscales. Letters L and S are here to help interpret severity of exposure. We found that 76% of the sample experienced none to low maltreatment. 15% reported moderate emotional neglect. 3% reported severe physical and emotional abuse with co-occurring sexual abuse and neglect. And finally, 6% reported severe sexual abuse as well as other types of abuse. Next slide, please. We then use these identified profiles as predictor to estimate trajectories of sexual risk behavior. As we can see in the unconditional growth model, the participants have an average of 1.61 sexual risk behavior on average. There is a linear increase of 0.35 more risk behaviors per year, and we see that this growth decelerated over time. In the conditional model, we see that compared to the low maltreatment profile, girls who were exposed to emotional neglect in the yellow box, they reported more sexual risk behavior than the reference group. Then the blue box shows that the group of sexually abused girls who also experienced all other types of abuse reported higher sexual risk behavior as well as a faster increase over time compared to the reference group. This pattern remained after adjusting for demographic characteristics, depression, age and menarche, and body mass index. Next slide, please. In summary, our data supported 4 maltreatment profiles in a sample of racial, ethnic, minority female adolescents. Our findings highlighted the critical role of underlying patterns of childhood maltreatment in subsequent sexual health risk across adolescence and young adulthood. We found elevated sexual risk for the emotional neglect group. The lack of emotional responsiveness from the parent or caregiver may lead to insecure attachment and low self-efficacy, which then precipitates the onset and risky pattern of sexual behavior during early and middle adolescence. We found that the highest risk group is sexually abused girls who also experience other types of abuse. Our finding is consistent with literature suggesting POLA victims exhibit worse outcomes, and is also consistent with the larger literature on the impact of sexual abuse. Sexually abused girls may experience unique risk factors. Those could include feelings of physical and cognitive exploitation, stigma, and social isolation, which then leave them increasingly vulnerable to sexual risk behavior across adolescence. Childhood maltreatment is a complex and serious public health issue. Understanding heterogeneity within the maltreated population can help inform targeted interventions. For example, in clinical and research settings, better and more comprehensive tools are needed to identify maltreatment exposure and their effects. Also, effective sexual health interventions need to occur earlier in adolescence, particularly among youth with a history of maltreatment. Given that sexually abused girls having the worst outcomes, they would benefit from additional mental and sexual health services to help mitigate the negative effects of maltreatment that otherwise could lead to more persistent patterns of sexual risk trajectories. Next slide, please. Given these findings, in my future research, I'm interested in examining unique pathways associated with different profiles of childhood maltreatment. Those include pubertal timing, peer exposure, stress response. I also plan to explore how protective factors such as supportive neighborhood and school environment may help mitigate the impact of childhood maltreatment. Finally, I'm interested in using nationally representative data to examine how childhood maltreatment influences the development of sexual risk behavior across the span of adolescence. Next slide, please. I would like to thank my amazing mentors, Dr. Lindsay Hoyt, Joshua Brown, and Angela Diaz for their tremendous support. I thank my wonderful co-authors for their passion and extensive knowledge and expertise. And special thanks to the founder, NIAID, for making this work possible. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Lee. Participants, if you have questions for Dr. New, please type them in the box and I'll compile them and ask them and pose them later to the entire group. Now, I'd like to present you perhaps our most senior early stage investigator, Dr. Matthew Goodwin, who's Associate Professor at Northeastern University's Colleges of Health Sciences and Computer Science. Matthew.
Thank you very much, Bill. I want to thank the selection committee as well for this honor and for the opportunity to share the work today that myself and colleagues are doing, trying to predict challenging behaviors in individuals with autism using wearable biosensors and machine learning classifiers. Next slide, please. So aggressive behavior from youth with autism can really compromise the ability to engage in foundational, educational, social, and family activities, which can markedly exacerbate morbidity and costs for those individuals and those families. As many as 2/3 of youth with autism display aggression, and it's one of the primary reasons that these families use behavioral healthcare services. Aggression, as you can imagine, can present imminent safety risks for the individual with autism and for others in the environment. And families report that aggression in their child increases their stress, their isolation, and their financial burden, and can decrease available support options. In addition to families, we have reports that there's higher staff burnout and claims for insurance compensatory payments. So it's also difficult for care providers. This class of behavior is particularly impairing and treatment refractory in the 30 to 40% of youth with autism who are minimally verbal. Their inability to self-report their distress that lead to behaviors can seem to occur without warning and sometimes long after any observable trigger. So the figure on the right is really our conceptual model. Instead of thinking of this behavior as escape or avoidant or oppositional or defiant or forensic, we would like to reconceptualize this really more as stress, coping, and emotion dysregulation, such that if something triggers an individual with autism to experience distress, we are hypothesizing that that increases physiological arousal. If one can regulate that experience, then they have no need to engage in aggression and may return to equilibrium. But if they experience that arousal and they cannot regulate that sensation, then they may engage in aggression in a maladaptive attempt to regain equilibrium. And if that is not successful, you could see a negative feedback loop wherein arousal increases aggression, aggression increases arousal, and this situation gets worse. Next slide, please. So autism is highly prevalent. We have estimates of 1 in 54. There's been a tremendous amount of autism research over the last few decades, but we have very little knowledge and treatment options for individuals with autism who are more severely impacted, those who are nonverbal, who have intellectual disability, and who engage in challenging behaviors. So there's really underrepresentation from this segment of the spectrum in modern large data repositories. And so we have had a unique opportunity to recruit from the Autism Inpatient Collection. This is an initiative funded by the Simons Foundation and the Nancy Lurie Marks Family Foundation, which is providing support for a variety of different specialized psychiatric inpatient units who have high referral rates for individuals with autism, where we can implement a standard data collection infrastructure that lets us gather large amounts of standardized data so that we could better understand this understudied segment of the autism population. And for the work that I am presenting today, I think that the inpatient setting is an ideal platform for us to safely and systematically identify mechanisms that might be underlying emotional and behavioral symptoms that may inform intervention. And the fact that we are collecting this data in situ in a real world setting, it helps us increase the safety given the inpatient staff and our control over environmental factors. But it's also likely to better generalize to real world settings because that is where the research is taking place. Next slide, please. So we're using really two primary sources of information. The participants in the study, the inpatients, are wearing a biosensor called the E4 by Empatica. This is wireless wrist worn. It records heart rate variability through blood volume pulse as measured by photoplasmography. It records, so measures of cardiovascular arousal. It's measuring 3-axis acceleration to give us a sense of motor activity, physical activity. It measures temperature and heat flux through thermopile, so that's giving you skin surface temperature. And then it records electrodermal activity or skin conductance, which is a sympathetic measure of arousal. At the same time, a research assistant who was observing the study participants and the clinicians who were supporting them have a mobile application where they can record onset and offset of aggression, self-injurious behavior, and emotion dysregulation. This is time synchronized with the sensor clock in the E4. So it enables us to determine onset, offset, duration of these behaviors and accompanying physiological reactivity before, during, and after the occasion of those behaviors. And so given prevailing literature in bipolar disorder, antisocial behavior that have high correlation of outcomes in externalizing behavior with physiological symptomology, and some of the early theories of autism that increased anxiety or arousal may be related to challenging behaviors, we have hypothesized that physiological arousal precedes aggressive behavior. And so our objective is to test whether the proximal onset of aggression can be predicted from preceding physiological signals using these wearable biosensors and machine learning algorithms. Next slide, please. So the results that we're presenting today in the paper that was submitted is from one clinical site, Maine Medical Center from Maine Health. There were 20 study participants with autism. We were able to gather 69 data collection sessions. This is a total of 87 hours of observation over these 20 individuals, wherein we saw 548 total aggressions with concurrent biosensor data. And the mean and standard deviation of the aggression frequency and duration was 27 episodes in a 4-hour period, lasting about 30 seconds each, observed by the research assistant staff. The study on the left is our first attempt of analyzing this data in the N of 20 and using logistic regression, wherein we're using a 15-second sliding window looking for variability in signal in time leading up to the challenging behavior. We use regularized regression and did this in both a population model where data is trained on a subset of all participants and then tested as a general classifier with individuals, and then an individual model wherein we train and test on only one individual's data, so train on their data and test in the future. We found that 3 minutes of prior biosensor data enabled us in a population model to predict 1 minute into the future with 71% accuracy. And 3 minutes of data in the past predicted 1 minute in the future with 84% accuracy when we used individual models. The update to that paper, and the one that was submitted for this consideration, tried using support vector machines, and we were able to demonstrate that 2 to 3 minutes of prior data enabled us to make a prediction 3 minutes into the future with 98% accuracy, irrespective of whether a population model or an individual model was used. Next slide, please. So the key findings are that the SVM model yields significant improvement in prediction performance, so 98% average prediction accuracy versus 84% in the logistic regression. The population and individual support vector machine models presented similar performance, which was not the case in logistic regression. There was much better accuracy in person-dependent than generalized. And a generalized classifier would have potentially more generalizability than person-dependent training. So that is a unique advantage of the SVM currently over logistic regression. And it also demonstrated that we can make predictions over longer future time windows using SVM, so 3 minutes into the future versus only 1 minute with logistic regression. Next slide, please. So we have demonstrated that a wearable biosensor and a mobile behavior annotation application has promise predicting aggression in autism. And I feel, and my collaborators feel, that this lays the groundwork for expanding data collection on precursor behaviors associated with aggression, understanding what are the triggers that precede a change in physiology that precedes behavior, and also future development of just-in-time adaptive intervention mobile health systems, where we might be able to enable new opportunities for intervention prior to before distress escalating to aggression. So preemptive interventions instead of consequential interventions, which are more typical in the field currently. And with input from parents and providers, a mobile application could be developed that displays real-time risk information and prompts users to initiate de-escalation or emotion regulation interventions before aggression occurs. We also can evaluate the effectiveness of this system by combining with state-of-the-art pharmacological and behavioral treatment models to see if it further enhances aggression reduction. There are several medications that are commonly used for this class of behavior, but most are not found to be very effective, and they have high side effects associated with those medications. So seeing if we can enable preemptive and environmental and behavioral interventions that have fewer side effects but might be similar or more efficacious than pharmaceutical would be a very worthwhile pursuit. We also think that uncovering physiological profiles relating to aggression in naturalistic settings may enhance clinical trials in precision medicine in a variety of ways. To produce digital biomarkers that better define psychiatric endophenotypes, to enable recruitment of more targeted experimental groups, and to help determine whether pharmaceuticals simply act as a sedative versus affect specific mechanisms that reduce physiological arousal associated with aggression. Next slide, please. So we're actively continuing this line of research in two ways. With the assistive technology, we have developed a system that we are soon to field trial, where we can push real-time aggression risk predictions via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to a mobile phone to the clinician, which displays a risk alert on the mobile application when indicated. And we're going to do a blind trial where 50% of those notifications will come from the classifier. The other 50% will be suppressed. We are not prescribing a specific intervention. We just want to see what is the effect of those alerts on consequent behavior observed in the study participants. But in the future, if efficacious, we could, or if it shows efficacy, we could ask caregivers to monitor these alerts and initiate de-escalation or emotion regulation interventions before interventions occur. So starting in the inpatient, but upon discharge, moving this out to outpatient and seeing how well parents can react to these notifications to support their children. And then to assess the efficacy of these alerts, facilitating those interventions through a randomized controlled trial in an outpatient setting. For the analytics, we're assessing the generalizability of our results in a larger sample of youth with autism, for which we've now obtained 70 different individuals participating in the study across 3 different clinical sites. We've also expanded from aggression to also look at self-injurious behavior and emotion dysregulation without aggression. You can think of this as a multi-class prediction. And our findings so far are that we have about 80% accuracy 3 minutes out, holding in this N of 70 across 3 sites for all 3 classes of behavior. So aggression, self-injury, and emotion dysregulation, we're able to predict independently 3 minutes in advance with 80% accuracy. That work is currently being written up for submission. And then we're developing a non-homogeneous point process model that's capable of providing a probabilistic measure of aggression onset at a longer future time interval. So we're trying to see if we can go beyond 3 minutes and to also have sort of a running counter of what is the probability of an event, not just saying that an event is likely within the next 3-minute interval, but as one gets closer to engaging in this behavior, the probability would be increasing. Next slide, please. So I'm very grateful for the families and the participants in this study, my faculty colleagues and graduate students at Northeastern, Also, the administrative staff and research staff and primary investigators. I've bolded Carla Mazevsky at University of Pittsburgh and Matt Siegel at Maine Medical. And I want to acknowledge some excellent funding support we've received from the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, NIDCD, Simons Foundation, and the Nancy Lear Marks Family Foundation. And I'm listing some relevant references as background and some of the materials I presented today. And I thank you for your attention.
And we thank you for a great presentation, Matthew. Although we won't list all references, when this event is archived, links to all 4 award-winning applications will be embedded in our website. If you have questions for Matthew, please type them in. I'll continue to compile them. Thank you to those who have sent them in. And so please now, let's turn to Dr. Stephanie Wilson, Assistant Professor of Psychology at Southern Methodist University. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for this wonderful honor. I am incredibly honored to be here with you. Thanks to the selection committee for asking me to share this work on spousal bereavement after dementia caregiving, a turning point for immune health. Next slide. Losing a spouse can increase risks for an earlier death. This is something that we've known for a number of years, whether it's all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease related, infectious disease related, or cardiovascular events. We know that that period, especially several months after one loses a spouse, is a riskier time. And this effect has really stood the test of time. It was discovered in the 70s and the 80s, and it splashed the headlines of JAMA, Nature, all the most widely read journals, and it has continued to intrigue researchers across many different fields. So psychoneuroimmunologists, those who study the links between psychology and immune function, think that immune pathways contribute to this effect. Psychoneuroimmunologists took a particular interest in bereavement in early human PNI studies because of it was thought to be a quintessential stressor, and indeed they found that bereaved people had poorer immune function than non-bereaved controls. There were consistent group differences. However, the one limitation of the literature as it stands is not paying as much attention to the lack of the context of the death. So when you hear the term bereavement, I would wonder what is conjured in your mind. Is it a sudden loss? Is it a heart attack? Is it surgical complications, a vehicle accident maybe? But for many, it doesn't look that way. Because 1 in 3 older adults die with Alzheimer's or a related dementia. And in the past 20 years, deaths from Alzheimer's have increased 145%. So the likelihood is high, and it's increasing, that people are experiencing spousal bereavement after serving in a caregiving role and after a very protracted time, in some cases, of decline, which is very different from the experience of a more sudden death. So we can see in the work shown on the right, which is a landmark example from Schultz and colleagues of bereaved caregivers in terms of their depressive symptoms. So here we're seeing a great characterization of psychosocial experience of caregivers, and this is on a scale where 16 is the clinical cutoff. So we can see that caregivers at the point of bereavement are several points above that clinical cutoff, and then they quickly recover over the course of the first several weeks and maintain subclinical levels over the ensuing months. Next slide, please. So it's important to note in the footnote, we have this information that before the death, the average depressive symptom score was about 16, about at the clinical cutoff, meaning that those caregivers were already at the clinical cutoff before they experienced the bereavement. And this really underscores the importance of that pre-loss data. Next slide, please. So really for caregivers, there are 2 processes going on. First, the experience of caregiving, the experience of decline, perhaps anticipatory grief, and then the experience of the physical loss. And what we have, it can be very difficult in the bereavement work to capture people before the physical loss. But what we have in terms of immune data for the most part is this subsequent trajectory that happens after the loss. But really the meaning of this trend, especially for caregivers and those who are having some dimension of experience beforehand, that this trend depends fully on what came before it. Next slide, please. So this trajectory is what we might expect perhaps with a sudden unexpected loss, where levels of distress are low, there's no rise, there's no anticipatory uptick, and then there's sudden reaction of distress that's marked and with a slow and incomplete recovery over time. Next slide, please. Alternatively, for a caregiver who might be completely maxed out on burden and distress, perhaps dealing with anticipatory grief in the death process, this same trend that happens after the physical loss could indicate immediate relief, or alternatively, next slide, please. There may be a combination of those two. So it could be that there is an escalation of distress as the death approaches, and then a modest reaction in terms of the physical loss, followed by recovery. Next slide, please. So this study was really interested in examining immune function and self-rated health as a clinically relevant corollary, both before and after spousal dementia caregivers' loss of their care recipient spouse. Next slide. We were also interested in identifying a potentially modifiable protective factor. In this case, we identified social integration, the nature of the social network, as one such factor. Holt-Lundstad and colleagues identified this as a stronger factor than abstaining from smoking, being physically active, maintaining low BMI, in terms of the magnitude of its protection against mortality. Next slide, please. So the data that were used to assess this question came from a larger longitudinal study of spousal dementia caregivers who experienced bereavement in the course of that study. And they had to have experienced bereavement, and they also needed to have at least 3 annual data points in the course of that. And that resulted in folks who had data up to 2 years pre-loss and up to 4 years post-loss, 52 caregivers. They were on average aged about 70, ranging from about 50 to about 88. And most were female, as is true of the larger caregiving population. Most were white and most were educated. So they provided yearly assessments of their social integration, the number of people with whom they had regular contact. So this for us is a measure of social network size. We're focusing on pre-bereavement network sizes here. They also each year completed a measure of self-rated health. How healthy do you feel overall? Poor, fair, good, excellent. So this is a very basic one-item measure that is sensitive both to physician-diagnosed illnesses and to preclinical changes in health, which makes it a good measure for us. And the measure of immune function that we have is the blastogenic response to 2 mitogens, concanavalin A and phytohemagglutinin. So this is the stimulation of immune cells of lymphocyte proliferation in response to these 2 stimulates. So it's a measure of immune function, immune response to a challenge, and higher levels indicate a more robust, a stronger, or a more favorable immune response. Next slide, please. So to address these questions, we used piecewise multi-level models that allowed us to break up the health trajectories into 2 parts, pre-loss and post-loss. We were able to examine 3 major components of these models. Next slide. So first is the degree to which each slope pre and post was different from 0. So we're assessing whether it's significantly positive or negative. Next slide. Whether those two slopes were different from each other, that is, whether there was a significant turning point in the course of health. Next slide. And whether there was a significant discontinuity, that is either a drop or an uptick at the point of the physical loss. Next slide, please. So what we found in terms of the average trajectories for self-rated health is that caregivers tended to decline in how well they felt as the loss approached, but there was an immediate rebounding that happened at the point of the loss and a leveling off from there. So this increase is about 33%. This restored caregivers' health to what they described as good. We covaried for age, sex, BMI, and chronic conditions in these models. Next slide, please. So when we break down the trajectories by caregivers' social networks, we can see that they're similar until after the death when they begin to diverge. So those who managed to maintain larger networks prior to bereavement, that was about 30 ties or so in the network, they continued to steadily improve in how healthy they felt as the years went by after the loss of their ailing spouse. So they are improving beyond what they experienced in the 2 years prior. By contrast, those with smaller networks, about 12 ties, did not experience such continued benefits after the loss. Next slide, please. So we saw similar declines in immune function on average that paralleled that trend before the loss in self-rated health that we saw. But rather than a sudden improvement, we saw a sudden decrement in that initial acute period. And then there was a longer term slower decline. So that decline that followed slowed by about 66%. And the trajectories for PHA were very similar, so we're just focusing on the data for Kane because they look so similar. Next slide, please. So when we separate the trajectories by the caregiver's social networks, we see the immune function drop is driven by those with larger networks. So this time-limited drop seems to reflect perhaps a normative response that we see in other data, but it also may indicate that the risk period is condensed for those with robust social resources. On the other hand, isolated caregivers show no discernible immune response with the physical loss of their spouse, but rather they show steep and steady declines across the entire period. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this is one of the first studies to examine dementia spousal caregivers' trajectories of immune function and self-rated health, both before and after bereavement. And next slide. That period leading up to the loss, we did detect declines in both immune function and self-rated health, which may reflect continued burden, anticipatory grief, or possibly a mixture of the two. Next slide. So these trajectories critically were distinguished by caregivers' social networks before the loss. So having a larger social network before the loss mitigated long-term immune declines and resulted in even higher levels of self-rated health than what they had before. And interestingly, the sudden drop in immune function occurred among those with more social resources. So it may point to what is a normative response to bereavement. But for socially isolated caregivers, the greatest declines happen outside of that bereavement window, which suggests perhaps that we should widen our measurement window to capture the full view of this process among vulnerable caregivers in particular. Next slide, please. This study really reinforces the value of taking a long view with bereavement, the necessity of collecting pre-loss data for making sense of these trajectories within person, and the importance of taking into account the cause of death and the caregiver role. So ultimately, when we look at bereavement, we may be attributing lingering effects of caregiving to bereavement. We're really conflating these processes potentially when we look at a mixture in a given sample. And the risk window may also be unique among caregivers, may be associated with a longer death process that may occur before the physical loss for caregivers. Next slide, please. So in terms of future directions, this work is situated within my larger program of research that seeks to integrate theoretical perspectives from lifespan development and health psychology to understand close relationships' effects on health. Here, bereavement appears to represent a sensitive period in which social ties are particularly important for the course of former caregivers' long-term health. My current R00 looks at the intersection of social emotional aging and biological aging in adult couples of all ages. We're really interested in tracing how these dynamics play out between caregiving dyads and in healthy couples over multiple timescales using advanced statistical methods. And ultimately, I aim for this work to identify targets for prevention and intervention that allow us to leverage our close relationships to maximize our healthy years. Next slide, please. Thanks very much to my co-authors. Many thanks to Ron Glazer for his invaluable contributions to the study. Many thanks as well to my graduate mentor and postdoc mentor, Lynn Martieri and Jan Kiecolt Glazer. Thanks to the NIH for the wonderful funding support. Please visit my website here or feel free to send me an email at the below email address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Dennis, could you bring up all our ESIs on video and voice, please? Stephanie, I since you're already on, I hope you won't mind if I start the first question with you. Did social network size change as a function of bereavement?
I couldn't unmute myself. Yeah, so great question. We found that social network size did change systematically as a function of the physical loss. So social networks actually shrunk as the physical loss approached, and then they rebounded thereafter. So we looked at this separately, pre and post social network size, and actually found that, somewhat surprisingly, that post-loss social network sizes didn't add any predictive value beyond pre-loss social network size, meaning that really to understand these trajectories, it's important to have that information before, and it also possibly suggests that before bereavement is a good time to intervene in terms of bolstering the social network for long-term benefits. I think you're muted, Dr. Elwood.
Well, then I was in very good company. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Your article, I'm sorry to follow up, your article positions your work in a thorough context of bereavement. I really appreciated that. And I wonder if your findings, which are similar to others, are sufficiently replicated to be shared with dementia spouses and other close caregivers? Or are we just not there yet?
So I think that we're showing a degree of recovery within person in terms of immune health and self-rated health that hasn't been seen. We've certainly seen that there's great resilience among caregivers after the physical loss. There are a subset of caregivers who are at risk for long-term adjustment problems, and you know, as a conservative scientist, I would like to see this work replicated, but it does fit with this larger narrative that it's possible to recover, and that's a good thing. We're not looking at disparities between caregivers and non-caregivers, and that's really important to do alongside because other work has shown that even though we're showing this recovery, there still can be lingering health decrements, and suggesting that it may not be a full recovery, but certainly in terms of identifying these possibly modifiable protective factors, I think it certainly couldn't hurt to try to work with communities and caregivers to really bolster those social resources.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the thorough answer and for letting me put you on the spot for so long. Caitlin, you were talking about your future directions and a more diverse sample. I'm wondering if you and your team have any ideas about how you might expect the results to differ.
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, I think we're talking about measuring social factors here. And so when we think about things that represent social factors, we're thinking about race and individual level SES. In this particular population, which was actually sampled for the reason to detect risk factors associated with breast cancer, we actually had a really limited sample, as I mentioned. And I think if we widen the group of people that we're looking at, we'll be able to either see potentially higher effect sizes or sort of explore interactions between lower socioeconomic status at an individual level mixed in with neighborhood effects separately. So I think it would be really helpful to look at sort of joint effects, and that includes with race and ethnicity as well, because we know those are correlated with stress and other social factors that can negatively influence health and aging. I believe you're muted.
3 for 3 now, I think. Sorry. Dr. Case, following up on that, Dr. Case wanted to know as to how you came to recruit us, or others came to recruit the sample of high socioeconomic status women, sisters even.
Yeah. Yes. So the idea behind the sister study cohort was to be able to have the power to detect differences in breast cancer cases related to a slew of environmental and other factors. And in order to do that, they designed the study specifically to sample women who would be at higher risk. So it's a higher risk population, given that they had a sister with breast cancer, but they didn't have breast cancer themselves. So we were able to look at epigenetic aging in relation to neighborhood factors in this cohort. And I think it was a great, first pass at looking at this exploratory association. But again, I think there's some generalizability issues where we could actually try to replicate this across other cohorts that are more representative.
Thanks. Earlier, Lee, you asked, put a question in the chat box for Caitlin. Would you like to ask that yourself? Or would you like me to do that for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, happy to. First, you said you had a great talk. And equally important, how did you, Caitlin, handle with the duration of living in the neighborhood? Did you have any mobility data?
So we have some mobility data. I think that's a great question and something that we're concerned about in terms of making a causal assumption about this. This is definitely using cross-sectional data with that limitation. And in that sense, I would confine it to a descriptive study. That being said, I think we did look at a sensitivity analysis. I don't think we published it, but we looked at women who had lived in their home for more than at least 10 years or longer. And we didn't see any substantive changes in the effects. Also, because this was a higher level SES group, they were actually more residentially stable. And we see that women in this group don't really move over time. And that will definitely be a challenge for following other more diverse cohorts who struggle with housing stability and that sort of thing, and trying to look at trajectories of neighborhood deprivation over the course of a larger period of someone's life. But thank you so much for that question.
And thank you for that answer. Dr. New, but before I ask you a question, I'd like to tell our participants that continue please posting in the chat box. But back to you, Lee. Maltreated girls face so many challenges in puberty, in both social and physical and biological changes. How have you considered the role of pubertal transition in your work?
Thank you so much for this fabulous question. In the current analysis, we include the age of menarche as a covariate in our model. But as you just said, pubertal transition can play many meaningful roles in this process. So the literature does suggest that childhood abuse and neglect could trigger the increase of pubertal hormones and precipitate early timing of puberty in girls. In addition, the pubertal transition is also associated with rapid physical, social changes that can be very stressful for adolescents. So girls who are exposed to maltreatment, they may find it particularly challenging navigating through this pubertal transition. So in one study that we conducted with this current data set, we found that early pubertal timing amplify the association between childhood maltreatment and sexually transmitted infection. So we found that maltreated girls who make an early transition to puberty have the worst sexual health outcomes. So yes, so pubertal transition, maltreatment, and sexual health, how they are really this complex relationship is really something I'm super interested, and I hope to more research could are done to further understand those relationships.
You and Caitlin both mentioned your eagerness to have larger and more diverse data sets. Do you know of any specific data sets either already synthesized or that could be synthesized to help answer your research questions?
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. So actually, we're the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study funded by NIH. I think that would be a wonderful data set that might be used to investigate these complex research questions. They started when children were 9 to 10, and they will track the behavioral development throughout adolescence. So I would be curious to see if the same maltreatment profiles exist across in this nationally representative sample and also across racial groups. And I wanted to see if sexual risk trajectories associated with those profiles would be different across groups. Yes, that would be super interesting.
Okay, thanks. I'll make a note unless there's someone from ABCD on the meeting who wants to hit you up directly, we'll try and make that contact for you.
Thank you.
Matthew, we've neglected you long enough, and you and you talked a great deal about the clinical implications for young people with autism. But did you have any additional thoughts on how the system could be expanded in addition to inpatient clinical care?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I sort of think a little bit about this research having 3 lanes. We're in the middle lane, which is if an imminent behavior is to occur, how do we enable people to anticipate it so they can triage their attention, they can ready themselves, they can try to accommodate the environment focus solely on that individual prior to engagement in this event, make them proactive instead of reactive. But autism, as I'm sure most on this call know, is a highly heterogeneous condition, a lot of individual differences. So I have confidence that we can detect a change in physiology that precedes the behavior. But the myriad of causal factors that are changing physiology and the variety of different interventions that one could try to preempt this behavior are very variable. And so one of the things that I think, in addition to the clinical utility, is understanding the population better, is if families are routinely collecting this information because it provides an affordance for them in the moment, it's sticky, meaning that they'll continue to use it. And then can we start to layer on, there's some good questions in the chat about this, layer on additional sources of data collection to understand what might be the antecedent inputs that are causing these changes in physiology, and what is the benefit or utility or efficacy of a variety of different interventions. This could be endogenous or exogenous. I mean, most of us, when a behavior like this occurs, we look around in the immediate environment and we're sort of trying to draw relations there. In some cases, that may be true. If someone's too crowded, if it's too loud, if they're not engaged in a task, or they're engaging in a unmastered and a difficult task. Conversely, it could be, or in addition, migraines, subclinical seizures, previous night's sleep, gastrointestinal issues. You have to remember, this population can't tell you that they're experiencing distress, let alone what the source of that distress is. So I sort of think of left lane, if we can gather more data and share this with functional behavior analysts and biomedical researchers, we might be able to start parsing a little bit subgroups of individuals with autism for whom we can identify what is the causal input that's driving the change in physiology and behavior. Then on the right lane, I'd love to work with healthcare providers. So if you've got 1 minute, if you've got 3 minutes, if you've got 5 minutes, what are evidence-based intervention practices that can be deployed at that time scale, and then systematically sample them so that it's not a days, weeks, months, years of trial and error on the part of a parent or a clinician, but you've got an early indication that, given the profile of this child, again, looking to subtype heterogeneous population, these might be expert system recommended interventions, given how that child responds to say, maybe a sampling of different intervention approaches. So while I still see all that being clinically relevant, it may also help us better understand autism not as a single disorder, but as a class of shared commonalities with individual difference. So more
Wow. Wow, that's really well put. I've got a follow up, and then I see you four taking notes on one another. So that leads me to think perhaps you have questions for one another. After this question from Matthew, I'll turn to UESIs, and then perhaps we'll take a break at 2:30 before we continue. But back to you, Dr. G. You mentioned the sticky data, the multiple lanes. NIH, of course, is very interested, and NSF, in mobile health, smart connected health. Both agencies are interested in, increasingly so, in AI. Applies actually to all of you. But Matthew, you mentioned inpatient care, families, healthcare providers. There's this with the sticky data. Some of that sticky data is family collected. Some of it is part of electronic health records, and the possibilities of ethics and legal considerations just is kind of mind-blowing. I wonder if and what you've and your team have thought about that.
Yeah, excellent point. I think we're providing an affordance that is going to be valuable to families, behavior analysts, and healthcare providers. But the way that we design the system and how we intend it to be used, I think we start to get into some gray area ethics if people are using this information to discriminate against individuals for whom you think that there is a behavior that is coming. I mean, these are probabilistic in nature. They're not certain. There are going to be false positives and there are going to be false negatives. What I would really hope that we as a whole community can be thinking about in terms of system design, what claims we make about the utility of such a system, and sort of recommendations for use. What I don't want to have happen is that a family is falsely believing that if a system is not indicating a problem, that they take their eyes off that child. And then it turns out that was a false negative, and then that child is exposing themselves to harm or harming other people because there was too much faith put into the system of being accurate all the time. Because no system predicting the future is ever accurate all the time. I mean, you see how well we do with meteorology and earthquakes and the stock market. There's no reason I would think that there's more variability in human behavior than there probably are in those three other systems. So I don't have an answer other than to say we all need to be very much aware of this. It could be exploited for non-beneficial reasons. And I think we need to be very clear about your opting into this, that the burden is on the user, being very clear about what it can do and can't do well. And I think the benefit outweighs the potential risk in a sense that it should be put into the world and used responsibly. And it's going to take us as a community to anticipate how people may violate that use and try to create standards or system usages that prevent that. But it's very important. Thank you.
Thanks. And you may have, you mentioned it and you partly and likely saw it in the chat box. Our director, Bill Riley, once treated children with autism, and the 3-minute advance warning is a great luxury and benefit to parents and other caregivers to intervene preemptively.
I'm very glad you said that. I'm not going to challenge this group, but if I were to sit here and count out 3 minutes worth of seconds, you'll realize that that is quite a bit of time to do something, even though it sounds short. And Bill, I want to tell you too that I was an early trainee of the mHealth Training Institute. That's where I first met you. And this project concept emerged in part during that week-long training. And so it's kind of a sweet homecoming that I get to share this work with you today.
That's great. Well, then our training was well worth it. Well done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Did you all have any questions for one another? Stephanie, I think that's a head nod.
Yeah, I did have a question for Matthew. This is a procedural question. Having done some ambulatory work myself, I was curious, as someone who's pushing the frontier of this area, can you talk about how you time synced the two devices and the precision of that?
Yeah, so we have overlapping interests, so I would not be surprised if we could have a fruitful conversation offline about our respective areas. So they're not integrated. That would be sort of the next step in order for us to assimilate the behavioral stamp annotations with the biosim stamp. What we do in both systems is we point it to time is, so they're using atomic clock, and we have very little drift in atomic clock. So we are associating these data, so they're collected separately, but they're being written to the same data set with the same time is trigger. So that's how we pull it back. Video and so usually procedurally when we have the physios, we would have time is viewed in the background, at least for the first initial frames. When you turn on the biosensor, we shake it so you can see acceleration changes. And we do the same at the end of a data collection session. That way you can very much see if there's any drift between what you see in time, what you have on record, what you can visually see. in the sensor data and in the video. But obviously with EMA, you don't have access to that. So I think it's a promising area for future development would be if we can get like hard-coded timestamp of a sensor and EMA program. And I say this, one, for preventing drift, but also I think there could be great utility of context-dependent prompts for e-journaling. So that is to say, if you could generate a question for a respondent when an algorithm detects that physiology has significantly changed from a preceding state, being able to ask someone in that moment, what are you feeling, or what are you doing, or who are you with? And I say this because we know quite well that humans have a hard time with recall bias. Imperfect memory of the past, we overrepresent negative things and positive things, and we tend to carry forward whatever's the most recent. So, and the more time you have to think about something and the longer delay between when you experience it, the more top-down processing you have, which may give you a different answer than what one was feeling actually in that moment. So I like this question because I think if we can find a good solution to have good timing information between how the body's responding and how someone is responding, there opens up opportunity to maybe get more accurate in situ, in moment data.
Great, thank you so much. I'd love to continue the conversation offline.
Me too.
You're muted, Dr. Elwood.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Does anyone else have a question for one another? If not, I have one for each of you. And as you appear, at least on my screen, Caitlin, Stephanie, Matthew, Lee, I'll ask you to answer it in just that way. All four of your studies collected and or integrated multiple types of data for your projects. Self-report, it's not an actograph, Matthew. I don't mean to, right, but the risk. Thank you. Stephanie, yours, psychoneuroendocrinology. Matthew, I already picked on you. Lee, you were consistently spoke about biopsychosocial measures. I wonder if each of you could comment on any part of that process, how it was that you came to, how your hypotheses led to multiple kinds of data, how difficult it is, what sort of collaborations do you need to have in order to come up with such integrative, award-winning science?
That is a very wonderful and challenging question. I think I really attribute the data availability, the expertise, the ability to analyze genomic DNA methylation to the resources available at NIEHS, and sort of just the cutting edge work that's being done in the epidemiology branch. The ability as a IRTA fellow to rely on experts, really leading experts in DNA methylation, as well as bring my own interests in just general social factors and public health, the way I was trained, the bread and butter of how I was trained as someone who had a degree in public health. It really is such a wonderful opportunity, and I attribute it to that, to my mentors, etc. And I just have to say that, it's just been such an amazing learning process, and really, I don't know what else to say, but collaboration is sort of the key, right? We come in and we have ideas, but you really rely on people in the field to cross-pollinate and have interdisciplinary work done. And that's sort of what I think is the most fruitful for science, is if you really have people with different knowledge coming together. And I love this honors because it really, part of, Matilda White Riley's work was really interdisciplinary work. So I think we all can get to we're working toward the same goal of health and wellness at the NIH, and interdisciplinary work helps us do that. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I agree absolutely about the need for collaboration, and the fact that NIH fosters that really enabled my project as well. So it was the integration of my postdoc mentors, many years of data collection. I could not have done that in a short period of a postdoc, or even a short pre-tenure period. That sort of generativity that our mentors have, and that the NIH really promotes as well, and integrating that with the training that I had in my graduate studies, and the developmental perspective that I was bringing to those data kind of anew, generated some of these new questions, looking at the data in a different way. But I also think that it's really important to bridge disciplines. The question was really a result of taking two very well-developed literatures, the bereavement and immune function literature, which has been going on for 40 years, and has a very well sort of characterized tradition, and bridging it with the caregiving literature, which also has a very long and very nuanced tradition. But here we are at the sort of intersection of those two, and really needing to understand the experience of bereavement for caregivers, because that's really becoming one of our predominant contexts. So I think it's very important to take an interdisciplinary view, because that's where a lot of the new and exciting questions are nowadays.
Great. Thank you. Matthew?
I 100% agree with the comments from Dr. Wilson and Dr. Lawrence. I guess what I would add is it helps if you also pick a research area that is a prevalent public health issue. My engagement with our project and with my interdisciplinary collaborators, I think, has been richer and probably more successful, because we know what success looks like. It's not a statistical significance. It's not a p-value. It's not necessarily a journal article, because most parents are not reading journals. It's demonstrating that you can affect change in an understood and under-resourced population. So the motivation, it aligns well with our scholarly rewards. But I think the translational nature that you're affecting public health really gets their attention, and really trying to work as hard as they can to succeed, because they know it's going to have a benefit to society. So it's risky. I'll say, as someone who was doing this work under tenure review, learning about another discipline that you weren't trained in isn't easy. It takes time. We have naive understanding about other people's science, and when you really get in there, you realize that what we think is easy is hard for them, or what they think is hard, we think is easy, and there's a lot of translating that has to happen. But if you stick through it and you're intellectually curious, you will learn it and you will start to apply it. And the rewards can be great when you see that it can affect many people's lives positively.
Thank you. I might put in since you mentioned the learning other people's disciplines, shameless plug for an OBSSR-led K-18 Mid-Career Award. We have about half a dozen IC partners on that expressly buys. Of course, you have to go through peer review, but the point is to allow researchers to time to train in cross-discipline disciplinary areas, and build those relationships that don't necessarily happen serendipitously. Just came to me as you mentioned that. I'm sorry to interrupt the flow.
No, I'm glad that you said it. I want to put a shameless plug in for the mHealth Training Institute, because that was also something that NIH offers combined with NSF. And I found that to be hugely beneficial, especially early in my career.
Thanks. Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Arwood, for this wonderful question. I totally agree that it is really important to collaborate and also do interdisciplinary work. I will also add that for a lot of those topics that we study, for example, childhood maltreatment and sexual risk, a lot of those could be underreported if we solely rely on self-report. And it's super important to build this trusting relationship between the researcher and the participants. So for that, I really thank my study team for building this trusting relationship with the study participants.
Terrific. In just a moment, I will ask our organizer, Mr. Mark Dennis, about the break. But a couple of you mentioned how we explain our work to our parents who may not have been received as much education as all of we have been privileged to have. I relate to that and in all of you. And I'm sure your parents are very proud that you work every day to improve the health and well-being of your fellow human beings, and you represent the many disciplines and many ESIs who submitted this year. I appreciate your work and your academic excellence so much. On behalf of all of us at NIH, thank you and congratulations again. When we're able to get to the office, we will send you certificates signed by Dr. Riley, so you can mark this honor in offices that some of us can get to and some of us have yet to do so. Thank you all again. I am hitting my, if we were on campus, you'd be hearing a great deal of applause now. So instead, I've hit my applause icon, and we'll turn things over to Mr. Mark Dennis, who will tell us about next steps. Mark?
Good afternoon. The next steps, I believe Dr. Elwood will have a break for a few minutes. And then at 3:10, we will start with the keynote lecture. Dr. Erica Spotts will moderate, and we'll interview. We'll talk about Dr. Ann Case, and then Dr. Ann Case will give her presentation, and hers is Death by Degree, U.S. Mortality in the 21st Century. So we will resume at 3:10.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to introduce Erica Spotts, who has led for many years, actually, the selection committee for the Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecturer. So, Erica?
Thank you. Can you hear me? My internet had just glitched a bit. Okay, I see thumbs up and such, so that's great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erica Spotts from OBSSR, and I'm also the chair of the Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecture Selection Committee. Welcome to the 14th Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecture. The recipient of this award has a research career that has advanced behavioral and social scientific knowledge in areas within NIH's mission. The recipient's research also follows Dr. White Riley's vision through an expanded conceptualization of health and well-being that includes cognitive, affective, and social functioning, as well as quality of life. Through behavioral social sciences research that improves the lives of people in society, through illuminating the complex and dynamic interplay among processes at multiple levels, for example, interactions between genes in the built, natural, and social environment, through the influence of social and behavioral factors on physical health and the utility of this knowledge for clinical practice and health policy, through life course perspectives on development, health, well-being of individuals and societies, excuse me, and through the research approaches that build theory and methods in the advancement of knowledge on the health and well-being. The NIH community nominates researchers for this award, and the recipient is then selected by a committee that I'd now like to thank. This year's committee comprised Valerina Holmes, Carmen Moten, April O, Mariella Shirley, Michael Sturrott, Pamela Thornton. The committee volunteers their time and effort to reading all of the nominations and then selecting one from among many deserving nominees. I would like to thank this year's committee for their service. If we were in person, we'd give them a wide round of applause right now, unfortunately. Maybe next year we'll be able to do that. So although she probably needs little introduction, it is now with great pleasure that I present to you this year's Matilda White Riley Lecturer, Dr. Ann Case. She is the Alexander Stewart 1886 Professor of Economics and Public Affairs Emeritus at Princeton University. She is a research associate of the National Bureau of Economic Research, a fellow of the Econometric Society, and a member of the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Medicine, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the American Philosophical Society. Her book with Angus Deaton, called Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism, was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller and was shortlisted for the Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year. Rather than take up precious time, I will turn the stage, as it were, over to Dr. Case. If we were in person, I would now ask her to come to the podium to receive her award. We will have a plaque for her that we will have sent to her. But given the current circumstances, please know that she will receive her award as soon as we're able. For now, I'll ask Dr. Case to begin her presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spotts, and thank you to the selection committee. This is really a great honor. I think Dr. White Riley would have been extraordinarily pleased with the earlier presentations that we saw. Congratulations to the early stage investigators. Such a rich set of research agendas. I was just blown away. So I was just really glad I could see them all this afternoon. I also wanted to say that when I looked at the list of people who have received this award in the past, it contains many of my heroes. So I am honored and humbled to accept this award. I'm going to share my screen with you. There we go. And I'm going to be talking mostly about work that I've been doing with Deaton, my co-author, where we've written a series of papers that the first set of them culminated into a book that I'll talk a bit about on what's happened to midlife mortality in the US. This research has been generously funded by the NIH, and I wanted to say that throughout my career, I have been funded by the NIH, and the fact that there were people at the NIH who believed in me and believed in my research made an enormous difference to my career path. So I am incredibly grateful for the funding that I've received. Angus and I published a book right at the beginning of the national emergency in March of last year. And just to give you a short overview of that, even before the arrival of COVID-19, the lives of Americans who do not hold a bachelor's degree, which are 2/3 of people in the US aged 25 to 64, their lives were already coming apart. And in the book, what we do is document what that means in terms of despair and excess mortality, and we discuss the long-run forces that we think are behind it. And what you're going to see over the course of the next, say, 50 minutes or so is that we believe a four-year college degree is increasingly the key to a longer and healthier life in this ever more meritocratic and unequal society. Now, when we talk about SES, and I'm using air quotes here, education is often kind of put into that mix. But what we're going to do is, instead of thinking of it as a marker for SES broadly, is to think about the mechanisms through which education can drive lives and has been a mechanism that has driven lives over the last 30 years or so. To start, though, I want to put you in the Wayback Machine. The 20th century was a time of great progress in terms of mortality. There was medical advance, there was clean water, there were amazing changes. And what you can see those, if you look at, for example, this is looking at mortality rates for people aged, men and women, whites, aged 45 to 54 over the sweep of the 20th century. Now, these are deaths per 100,000 people at risk, and all the death rates I show you will be those today. And you can see that the death rate, the risk of dying in this age group in each one of these years fell from 1,500 per 100,000 down to less than 400 per 100,000 by the end of the century. Now you can see the 1918 flu epidemic, right, and other epidemics that took their toll. You can also see a plateau here around 1960 that was largely caused by the fact that people then in their 40s and 50s had smoked like chimneys when they were in their 20s and 30s, and they were dying of lung cancer and heart disease. But then two things happened. One, there was behavioral change. People stopped smoking in big numbers. And two, there was medical advance, that onto the market came these inexpensive, extremely effective antihypertensives, and people stopped dropping dead from coronary heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and progress continued at about 2% a year. And we got lulled into kind of thinking that that kind of progress was going to continue. But what happened in other rich countries is that that progress did continue. So this is age-adjusted mortality for men and women 45 to 54 and other English-speaking countries and the rich countries of Europe. And they saw mortality decline continue at 2% a year. But in the US, we decided...
I'm sorry, Dr. Case, I'm sorry, we see gray boxes on your screen. And apparently, if you do Control-Alt-Shift-H, they'll go away.
Control-Alt-Shift-H. How is that?
There are fewer of them.
Is there anything?
Mr. Labuda, I'm not sure.
Why don't I stop sharing and share again?
That might work. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Did they just appear, or were they there at the beginning?
About slide 2.
Okay. How about now?
Oh, no, they're still there.
They're still there. The only shortcut that I'm aware of to eliminate them would be Control-Alt-Shift-H, which you just did, correct?
Control.
Yeah, some of them would.
H. Did not work. Is that right?
There are fewer of them. I think we should go ahead. I think they're kind of around the outside of the screen, so I think that we can get.
Okay. Most of everything I'm going to say, I'll say in words. It's just that the graphs give it a little more power. But let's see how this. I guess we should proceed and see how this goes.
That sounds good.
I don't see any other real way forward. In the US, what happened was for Hispanics mortality over this period fell at 2% a year. Their mortality rates looked a lot like people in Great Britain. And for African Americans, whose mortality rates are higher than whites, continue to be higher than whites, but over this period, their mortality was declining at 2.5% a year. So they were doing they were also doing well. But the odd group out were white non-Hispanics, whose mortality rates actually stopped declining before the change of the century and started to rise or flatlined at best. So that a yawning gap opened up between mortality rates in the US in midlife and mortality rates in the other rich countries of the world. Now, when we started this work, we thought this is really odd. The most privileged group in the US, the group that has the most education, that has the most wealth, is the group that's actually seeing their mortality stop falling and start to rise. So we thought that would be the place we would start to dig. Now, what's happened since we started this work is more years have passed, and unfortunately, for the Black non-Hispanic community, mortality rates stopped falling also and began to rise. This was largely due to the arrival of fentanyl, which is a very heavy-duty opioid, which is used in hospitals, but it became a street drug, and it is deadly. It mixes with heroin, it mixes with cocaine, and a little bit too much can mean the end. So we're going to come back to what's happened to Black non-Hispanics as well in just a little while, and also we can return to it when we look at questions and answers. But the question about, well, is this a big deal or a little deal that mortality rates in midlife stop falling for whites? Well, it's a big enough deal that life expectancy fell in the US for 3 years straight, from 2014 to 2017. Now remember, this is all pre-COVID. It will fall again for 2020. But that 3-year decline had not happened in the US for a century, not since World War I and the 1918 flu epidemic. And the decline was driven by what had happened to mortality among prime-aged adults, 25 to 64. Mortality rate for the elderly was continuing to fall. Mortality rate for children was continuing to fall. But what happened in midlife was a big enough event that it turned life expectancy the wrong way. Now, part of that is due to the fact that we stopped making progress against heart disease. Heart disease was our engine of progress in the last part of the 20th century. And if we had continued to make progress against heart disease, probably all-cause mortality would not have turned the wrong way. But it flatlined. And there's work to be done on exactly why that happened. And again, we can return to that in the Q&A if you'd like. But the 3 causes of death that actually were rising were from suicide, from drug overdose, and from alcoholic liver disease. Now, if you can see the screen, what you would see is that these increases were heavily concentrated among people who had not gone to college for 4 years. So for people with a BA or more, there were small increases in each one of these causes of death, but they're dwarfed by what happened for people without a BA. And what we find in our work is that college degree is a meaningful dividing line. And since 1989, education has been recorded on the standard US death certificate. And so we have like 73 million records for adults aged 25 and above, which we use in most of this analysis. Now, what you're looking at is one age group. This is white non-Hispanics age 50 to 54. But it's not just for people in that part of midlife. It turns out for every 5-year age group, from 25 to 29-year-olds through 60 to 64-year-olds, you see this dramatic increase in what we call deaths of despair, and almost no change for people with a college degree. Now, we bin these things together in a lot of the work because for many reasons. One, we think they have a lot in common. It's all death by one's own hand. They all certainly display a particular amount of despair. It's also the case that for a medical examiner or a coroner, it's very hard sometimes to know whether or not a drug overdose was intentional or was an accident. So when you bin them together, the worry about was it intentional, was it an accident, and someone had to make that decision, those problems somewhat disappear. Now in 2019, which is the last year for which we've got data, there were 164,000 deaths in the US from drugs, alcohol, suicide. That's up from 65,000 deaths in 1995. Now, we know, relative to COVID, those numbers don't seem very large, perhaps. They seem pretty large to me. And hopefully, once we have enough vaccines out there and in the arms of people, and we're looking at COVID in the rearview mirror, there's no vaccine that we have available that's going to stop people from taking their lives in these ways. We had sort of hoped that when people got to retirement age, that maybe these deaths of despair would go away. But unfortunately, if you can see the slide, you can see that it's bleeding into early old age, that among people aged 65 to 69, we're beginning to see that same phenomenon of increases for people without a BA and fairly flat for people with a BA. We tend to think, though, that instead of looking at it by age group, it's more useful for us to think about it by birth cohort. So if you look at people without a BA who were born in particular birth years, and the screen shows 1940, 45, 50, 55, and onward. So if you were born in 1940, your risk of dying from one of these deaths of despair is pretty flat with age and has not changed much. There's a little bit of daylight between that and the cohort born in 1945, but by the time you get to the cohort of 1950, at any given age, they're at higher risk of dying from one of these deaths of despair. Higher still in 55, higher still in born in 1960. So there's an arrow that shows the difference when you're in your late 40s of the risk for someone born in 1945 and the risk born in 1970, and it's about 3 times the risk. It's not just baby boomers. It's not as if, okay, these people were born, there was the summer of love in 1968, they all took drugs. Once they exit stage right, everything's going to be okay. It gets worse for Gen X, it gets worse for Gen Y, and it gets worse for millennials. I could show you this picture separately for drugs, alcohol, and suicide. All 3 of them show the same pattern of things getting worse for people born later. And if you compare people with and without a bachelor's degree, it looks like they live in different universes. So this is really a phenomenon that is hitting people without a BA. And I can say that if you divide this up into high school, some college, BA or more, the people with some college look very much like the people with a high school degree or less, and not like the people with a BA or more. So this dividing line seems like a pretty clear one to us. Now this took us back to Durkheim, who in 1897 wrote, the big text on suicide and talked about the risk of suicide if there's not enough social integration or if there's too much social regulation. And he posited that suicides were more likely at times of great upheaval. And we argue that the kind of upheaval that the white working class saw after about 1970 could be responsible for what we're seeing now today. Now, what do we know about who's dying? this phenomenon is geographically widespread. Every US state saw increases in all 3 causes of death between 2000 and 2018. So it's not just like West Virginia, which is having a horrible time with the opioid crisis. Mississippi, people are not dying as much from opioids, but they are dying in much larger numbers from alcoholic liver disease. In the mountain states, suicide is a big risk. And we think of it as sort of a pick your poison, that it manifests itself somewhat differently in different places, but in all states, we see increases in all 3 causes of death. And it's happening to men and women. So a lot of newspaper writers picking up the story that we tell, in the text, they say it properly, but in the headline, it will be white men dying. But the truth is, for women and for men without a BA, the increase in mortality from deaths of despair has been almost identical. So men are more likely, have always been more likely to kill themselves in all 3 of these ways. But women are keeping pace with men in terms of the increase. Now, if you go back far enough in the day, women really didn't kill themselves in these ways. And we think maybe the headline writers just can't believe that women would kill themselves in these ways. But now it is happening. Oh, I wanted to, if you can see this part of the screen, I wanted to remind myself to ask you if you can find the Great Recession in this picture. Because what you see in the picture is a slow, steady trend line up in terms of increases in deaths from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. So here is the Great Recession. I put in 2 gray bars so you can see where it was. And yes, indeed, if you did a difference in difference estimation here and said, what did these deaths look like before the Great Recession and after the Great Recession, they're higher after, but they were rising. Well, they were rising at least as far back as we have in the data, the ability to divide death certificates with and without a BA. We had thought when we started this work that it was going to be concurrent economic conditions that caused this to happen, that it was going to be unemployment rates, it's going to be short-term cuts in people's incomes, and we did not find that. So we think the roots of this are deeper and are older. And so that's what we went and started to dig to try to find. Now, underneath the body counts, underneath the mortality counts, what we find is increasing reports of pain year on year in the National Health Interview Survey. We find increasing reports of social isolation and of poor mental health year on year, but only among those without a college degree. For people with a BA, it's pretty much as it was. Now, with pain, there's only one way to measure pain, and that's to ask someone about the kind of pain they're feeling. Because these are self-reported, they may be easier for some people to dismiss. But when you combine them with these increases in mortality, we think they fit into a larger picture. The great political philosopher Michael Sandel has a new book on meritocracy. And this quote from his book, that the college degree is a condition of dignified work and of social esteem. We think this describes a lot of what we're seeing here. But what does that mean actually when you take it home? Well, when you take it home, what that means is that if you look at wages of people with less than a BA, they've been falling since, well, the high watermark for blue-collar wages was 1972. This is taking the current population survey and asking it to tell you about median wages for people with, these are men now, without a BA, over the sweep of time. And you can see it's been on a long downward trend. Wages go up and down a little bit with the business cycle. That's natural. There was a lot made of the fact that post-Great Recession, finally wages among working class men were starting to rise. But you can see that, yes, they've been rising, but they're nowhere near where they had been in 2000, much less what they had been in the 1980s. So there's been a real decline in wages for men without a BA. For women, the wages rose a bit, but they've been declining since about 2000. And in addition to that, attachment to the labor force has fallen for people without a college degree. For women, attachment to the labor force for women without a BA peaked in 2000 and has been falling since then. For men without a BA, they've been on a long-term decline in employment. So the right-hand picture here is the employment to population ratio. This tells you about the number of people employed relative to the population. And since 1979, employment drops during recessions, which are marked, if you can see them, by these little red lines. People make their way eventually back into the labor force. Another recession hits, employment drops. But there's been this ratcheting downward. So after people reattach to the labor market, fewer of them are working than had been working at the previous peak, which was below the peak before that. So there's been this long-term decline in attachment to the labor market and a long-term decline in wages. There's little wage change within a job. So loss of wages and work come from losing and replacing jobs. And many of the jobs that are replaced are worse than the jobs that were left. They're oftentimes outsourced jobs to transport companies, to security companies, to food services. These are companies to cleaning services. There's no ladder up, there's no possibility of advancement, there's no on-the-job training. You don't have prospects. And we think that is a huge part of what happened next to this community, which is less about the loss of material well-being, but more a loss of meaning and status through work. It's also the case, our friends in sociology had been telling us for a couple of decades that working class people don't feel they can get married now unless one of them has a job with prospects. And I thought, when they would tell me that, oh, that's interesting, but I didn't really realize how important it was going to be for my own work. But what's happened is marriage rates decline simultaneously, but only for people without a BA. People cohabit, but unlike cohabitations in Europe, which tend to be quite stable, cohabitations in the US are actually quite fragile. So people cohabit, they may have a child, they break up, they cohabit again, they may have another child, they break up. So there's instability in work life, there's instability in home life, there's loss of community, there's really a Durkheimian recipe here for suicide. And we see a lot of parallels between what happened to the white working class over this period and what had happened to the Black working class in the 1960s and the 1970s when manufacturing left the cities and then left communities without a source of jobs and meaning through work, and marriage rates declined and out-of-wedlock childbearing increased. And in the African-American communities, there was a crack epidemic. In the white working class communities, there was an opioid epidemic. So the parallels are obviously not going to be perfect. Whites don't face the same kind of covert and overt discrimination that the Blacks face. But there are many things we think that these things have in common. It was like the wheel came around the first time and came for the Black working class. The wheel has come around again, and this time it's come for the white working class. This is from new work that Angus and I just published, which it looks at expected years of life lived between a person's 25th and 75th birthday. So it's sometimes called temporary life expectancy, although temporary here seems like a kind of odd phrase, given that we're looking at a 50-year period of time. So the maximum number of years you could live during that stretch of time would be 50. And if you look, men on the left and women on the right, if you look at the expected years of life to live, back in 1990, those expected years to live was much more similar by race. But by close to 2000, those years left to live is much more similar by education. So we think that it's possible that discrimination based on race is giving way in part to discrimination based on education. And in all of these pictures, it is still the case that Black life expectancy is below white life expectancy. But it looks like these things are converging based on education rather than by race. Now, what happened to the working class? Well, there was globalization, which has gotten quite a lot of attention, jobs leading the country. There was automation. We're still producing as much in the US as we ever did. It's just we need fewer workers to do it because we have so many more robots. But that was true in all the rich countries who didn't see their deaths of despair rise. So we had to think, like, what is different about the US? And there are two things that we highlight in the book. The first is that the other rich countries did not unleash heavy-duty opioids into the population. Now, in the book, we argue that the despair and the increases in suicide and drug overdose and alcoholic liver disease started to increase prior to the arrival of OxyContin in 1996. But certainly the arrival of a drug that's 1.5 times as strong as morphine that any doctor with a script could write you a prescription for, and that Big Pharma, Purdue Pharmaceutical in particular, sent marketers out looking for areas where they thought the ground was fertile and pushed the drugs in those areas. That made this crisis much more horrific than it needed to be. Now, a lot's been written on this, so I'm not going to spend much time on it here. And I'm going to move to the other thing that's really different about the US relative to the rest of the rich world. And that is our healthcare industry. Our healthcare is the most expensive in the world, but on many metrics, we have the worst health in the rich world. We have the lowest life expectancy in the rich world. In many of the surveys that are run in the US and comparable countries, we come out near the bottom. In the book, we argue that life expectancy in the US fell not in spite of what we spend on healthcare, but because of what we spend on healthcare. And it can be useful to look at a comparison with other rich countries over the period between 1970 and 2015. If you look at the UK and you look at life expectancy at birth, and you see how much the country was spending on health expenditure per capita between 1970, which is going to be the lower left here, and 2015, which is going to be the upper right here, you can see in the UK, life expectancy increased and health expenditure per person rose. The same was true in Australia, but they're very much in the same neighborhood. The same was true in Canada, who spend a little bit more per person than is true in Australia or the UK, but it's still in the same neighborhood, as is France. Now, the next most expensive country after the US is Switzerland. And the Swiss spend more. They also live 5 years longer than do Americans. And if you want to see how Americans stack up against the countries of Europe or the other rich countries, well, this was the US between 1970 and 1982. More expensive and poorer outcomes, even back in 1970. This is what it looked like by 1990, and this is what it looks like by 2015. that we just totally left the herd in terms of how much we spent, and our life expectancy actually started to turn the wrong way. So it's hard to exaggerate what an effect that has on the economy as a whole. Excuse me. We in the US, we spend almost $1.05 on the healthcare industry. Switzerland is the next most expensive at 12 and almost 12.5%. If we spent the same fraction as the Swiss spent, we would save more than $1 trillion a year. Now, there's a recent JAMA piece which does the accounting the other way around from the bottom up. How much do we spend on this? How much do we spend on that? And they come up with a very similar number of $1 trillion a year. That's more than $8,300 a household. And that's just the excess spending. It's half again as much as we spend on the entire military. Now, that has to come from somewhere, right? And it comes out of wages or profits or taxes. Most people think that their employer provided healthcare insurance is a gift, but that gift is being deducted in part or in whole from what would be a paycheck. So if I'm an employer and I know how much a worker is worth to me, I don't really care whether I pay that person that entire amount in wages, or if I divide it between this much goes to their healthcare premium and I give them the rest in wages. So as the healthcare premium went up and up and up, wages declined and declined and declined. And it's also the case that many firms who base their share, which is on average 71%, of a $21,000 a year premium, which was what it was in 2019 for a family policy, they look at that and they think, I'm going to outsource those low wage jobs, right? Which is how I end up working for the Albright Cleaning Company instead of working for a brand named hotel. Premia don't vary very much by workers' earnings. So the CEO and the janitor, the healthcare premium, if they both have their family policy on it, are going to be very, very similar. It's like a fixed cost to get this person in the game. And what it does to employment, well, you know, there's a lot of talk about what effect the raising the minimum wage might have, and maybe it might have negative effects on employment. And this is a perennial issue, a perennial discussion we have. But we haven't had that discussion on tying health insurance to employers and what that does for the employer's decisions about hiring low-skilled workers. So we argue that financing healthcare in this way just takes a wrecking ball to the low-skilled labor market in the US. It's also the case that states have to pay their share of Medicaid. So as those costs have gone up and up and up, the states have less money for other things that we need and that we want. Less money for schools, less money for the once great state university systems, less money for infrastructure. So this is a cost that has fingers everywhere and has effect on what state governments can do. It has effects on the low-wage labor market, which then has effects on marriage markets, which has effects on out-of-wedlock childbearing. We think that all of these are knock-on effects that come in large part because of the way we've decided to fund our healthcare system and because we've let our healthcare system become so expensive. Now, in the book, we talk about the future of capitalism, not the failure of capitalism. And we think it needs to be fixed, be put back up on the rails. And we use healthcare as one of the examples because we think reform to it could be central. It's an injury that we're inflicting on ourselves. We thought maybe COVID might give us an opportunity for real reform in the sense that when people in the middle of the distribution start to get medical bills that they cannot pay, they may begin to take the funding of healthcare more seriously than they had in the past. It still remains to be seen, but there are 5 healthcare lobbyists for every member of Congress. They are at the table when legislation is being written, and it's a very powerful force right now. More generally, we think that the rise of corporate lobbying and the decline of unions has left little representation for less educated workers in Washington, and that if you're not on the menu, or if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we worry that that's what's happened to the low-wage workers, which has had these effects that has driven then these deaths of despair. Now, we did have to take on board the fact that we published this book the same week that we started to have a national emergency because of COVID. One of the things I tell young authors is just one tip. Try not to publish your book in the same week we start a pandemic of biblical proportions. That would be a really good tip. Now, we see similarities between the epidemic that we write about in the book and the COVID epidemic. Both are striking low-skilled, less educated workers harder, right? Low-skilled, less educated workers are oftentimes the frontline workers, the bus drivers, people working in hospitals, people working in grocery stores. Both the epidemic we write about in the book and the COVID epidemic have been made worse by distrust in government. So in my epidemic, it's the case that low-skilled, less educated people think the system is rigged against them. And they don't trust government because they have not seen government do things that might be helpful to level the playing field for them. In the COVID epidemic, as we know, there are a lot of people for whom mask wearing or social distancing, well, those were just orders that were coming down from on high, and we don't trust the voices that are telling us to do those things. Both epidemics highlight problems with public health in the US, although, truth in advertising, many countries that have very good public health systems also have had very, very large difficulties during the COVID epidemic. Both epidemics, though, highlight different reasons why tying health insurance to employers is a miserable way to fund a healthcare system. So when employers have to pay these healthcare premia and they get out of control, that has very large implications for the low-skilled labor market. With the COVID epidemic, when 20 million people lost their jobs in the first month after lockdown, and some large fraction of them lost their health insurance simultaneously, it tells you that this may not be the best way to provide health insurance. There are differences between the epidemics, though. People of color have been hit much harder by COVID than have white non-Hispanics. Also, deaths of despair have been heavily concentrated in midlife. COVID has been heavily concentrated among the elderly. There are vaccines for COVID, but there are no vaccines available for deaths of despair. Now, I want to end, though, by showing you from Newark what the death rates in 2020 looked like by ethnicity for prime-aged people, 25 to 64, and for people 65 and above, and contrast people with and without a college degree. And what you can see is that you can see what I just mentioned, that Native Americans and African Americans and Hispanics have been much, much more badly hammered by COVID than they had been by deaths of despair. But it's also the case for all of these groups that people with a BA have been much, much more protected than the people without a BA. That continues to be true even among the elderly, right? So these people are not mostly working at jobs where they're on the front lines without a college degree. But it is still the case that they face a higher risk than do people with a BA. So on that cheerful note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Most of you, I'm afraid, only saw some subset of that. But I'm very happy for discussion and to take questions.
Dr. Case, thank you so much for an incredible lecture. I know I'm going to be thinking about that for days to come, if not longer. I did want to, we have some questions. I should also say that if we were in person, I'm sure you would get a very loud round of applause. I wanted to offer the first questions to our director and deputy director, Bill Riley and Christine Hunter, if they had something they wanted to ask you. Otherwise, I will go to the questions that are in the chat, and then I'm sure will continue to come in the chat. Bill, did you?
Erica, since you invited me, I'll jump in.
Okay.
And you know, the employer-sponsored health insurance is an accident, right? It's occurred because of wage controls and tax benefits for, or tax exemption for that particular benefit to attract workers. Is there an association with when that happened and some of the changes that we see?
You know, not exactly when that happened, because back in the day, healthcare wasn't that expensive.
Yeah.
There wasn't as much healthcare could do, but it also didn't cost so much. But it's fun. But my dear now departed colleague Uwe Reinhardt, right, who had been ringing the bell on how expensive healthcare was getting. You know, you can take this back to the 1970s, and that is when you begin to see the problems begin, the erosion begin with the wages in the workforce.
Interesting. Thank you.
Christine, did you have any questions? Or are you, oh, I just see that now. Never mind. So somebody just asked if the slides will be shared online. We share a recording of the talk. I believe it's about 2 weeks after today. So you'll be able to review the talks that we heard today. So let me start at the top. So this is interesting. Are there any protective effects for those who co-occupy household members or connections with education that have a higher than a BA?
That's a great question, and I wish we could answer it, but like so many of the things that is not on the death certificate, right? So income isn't there, occupation isn't there, cohabitation isn't there, but that does not mean that eventually we might not know more about it. To the extent that some groups are in a very formal dance to see whether or not they can attach more death records back to the current population survey, some of those questions may at some point be answerable. But currently, we don't know. I mean, it's a great question.
Yeah. So some of these I think came in before you actually ended up answering them during your discussion. So you talked about the differences in deaths of despair for men and women. There is a question about how much of this is attributable to changes over time in ascertainment and reporting.
You know, that we worried a bit about that, but we think by the time that we're talking about, which is post 1990, that suicides and drug overdoses both have to be sort of certifiable, right? And so we think that that's the case, that from that point that there's going to be some misclassification, or sometimes it gets reported as a heart attack, but really what it was a suicide. There's not much we can do about that, but we think, having talked to a number of people, because we were worried about that we think that it's picking up a real phenomenon.
Yeah. There's some questions about differences based on geographic region by urban versus rural.
That's also a really good question. And the press wants to make this into a rural problem, that this is something that happened in rural America. And I'm sorry I didn't have a slide on that, because I do have a slide on that, which is if you go to CDC Wonder, you can actually pull this by level of urbanicity. And what you see is that in every level of urbanicity, from central city MSAs down through rural areas, you see the same slope, you see the same increase. So the suburban MSAs, like where I live, start at a lower level of death from these causes, but the increase has been identical. And the rural is right in the mix with everything else. And again, I have to wonder, but I think the press just can't imagine, they have it in their minds that these rural areas were pristine and then suddenly this crisis hit them. And maybe that's why they highlight it as being a rural problem, but it's an everywhere problem.
So there's, I think you addressed this a little bit, but there's some questions about if economic conditions and health have been declining since around 1980, what are the major national level factors that have kind of catalyzed this decline? And what happened in the 80s that were so significant?
So part of this is that there was a real shift in the power between capital and labor. So unions declined quite dramatically over that period of time. It was the case also that people who had a high school degree, for example, who would have been employable in a white collar job, those jobs started to disappear and were replaced by people with a BA. So people with a high school degree began to find that they could not find good job prospects with a ladder up, the way that they might have a generation before that. So it's sort of a confluence of things. Certainly, for example, I have friends who were in the Clinton administration when NAFTA passed. This is the North American Free Trade Agreement. And they knew that jobs would be lost, but they thought there would be a real upskilling. This would be an impetus for us to all upskill. Well, the jobs were lost and the upskilling did not take place. And, you know, that happened. There have been, you know, repeated times in which, you know, the pie is getting bigger, but there's also been a redistribution of the pie away from less skilled workers and toward corporate America and the people who own the capital. I sound like a Marxist. I'm not. I believe in capitalism. I know it lifted 250 million people out of poverty. But we need to think about whether it's working for people in the US today.
Sorry. So the 2030 census will rely more than before. I think he means it might be 2020 census, but I'll let you determine that. Will rely more than before on administrative records. What would you advise decision makers about the use of administrative records, for example, giving context to major health trends? Maybe that is the 2030 census. I'm not sure.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but maybe the person can.
Is Richard Morris on? Could he be unmuted to clarify the question?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was referring to the 2030 census, looking forward at the trend of going increasingly to the use of administrative records. And I was observing from your talk that you gleaned a lot from death records, but that was not entirely satisfying. So if the future census was to provide an even more granular context to the work that you're doing, are there 2 or 3 themes that you would emphasize for those people who are planning the future census, given that the census is a resource to almost all sorts of demographic and public health research in the country?
It's true, but we don't. I think the hard part here is that in order for people's anonymity to be maintained, it is very hard to combine death records with other records that we might be interested in. Raj Chetty and his research group at Opportunity Insights has done terrific work matching death records with tax records. The only problem with that is that with the tax records, you don't have like education isn't on the tax record, ethnicity isn't on the tax record. So if you wanted to look, you would need something more like the current population survey, or now the American Community Survey, right, which is a rolling survey between the decennial censuses. It's extraordinarily large. But if people could somehow find a way to safely allow researchers to combine the death records with records from the American Community Survey, that would be huge, because that would open up the opportunity to answer, for example, the first question that came in on living arrangements, right? Or you could be looking at, over time, what happened to groups divided up in various ways. And until we are in a world where we have some safe space that allows us to combine those records, is going to be a challenge.
Thank you. That was a very helpful, very thoughtful comment.
Thanks. So I'm going to read this one. I'm going to quote this one from someone who has written in and says, my 18-year-old told me kids now do not feel that it's important to go to college. This is because they see so many people who do not go to college but are still okay in life. He said, look at Zuckerberg. So what should our message be to our kids?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know what it would be to my kids, which is that, look, I'm going to show you these graphs, you're going to college, but that's not really an appropriate answer here. I don't think everyone should have to go to college. I think that what we need to do is to change the pre-K to 12 education system so that it stops being quite as laser focused on the minority of kids who are college bound, and actually provide skills or training for kids who, for whatever reason, choose not to go to college. I think everybody who wants to go to college should have a shot at it. But I don't think it means that all of us need to go to college to protect ourselves against these things happening. But one thing is for sure, historically, meaning until about 1980, the wage premium, the earnings premium of college, four-year degree over a high school degree was 40%. That on average, a person with a college degree would earn 40% more than a person with a high school degree. But by 2000, that had doubled. So instead of it being a 40% premium, it's an 80% premium. That's huge. So as far as, yes, there are Zuckerbergs, but there are movie stars and there are rock stars. But it's really the case that without additional training of some sort, you could become a very successful electrician or plumber, or have a skill set where you're working in a hospital at a highly skilled job that you could get trained. Those jobs will be out there, but that's a rougher road than college right now.
To what extent, this is a question about the data that you presented on the Swiss. To what extent do they have a higher life expectancy because of better environmental conditions, so a place effect, or greater cultural homogeneity, as opposed to higher per person spending on healthcare? Since this person notes that the US is a diverse place, not as homogenous.
It is true that the US is a diverse place, but if you looked at, for example, just white non-Hispanics, you're going to find it just among white non-Hispanics as well, right? So it's, we spend twice as much as the UK and most European countries, right? So, and they're all living longer than we are. Not all of them are diverse, it's true, but some of them are. They all have their own challenges. They're all living longer than we are, spending half as much. I mean, the tension here would come if we had longer life expectancy and we spent twice as much. But the truth is, we have our health is poorer, even if you look narrowly within ethnicities. It's the case that we do a much poorer job than other countries. It's not that I think healthcare doesn't matter, but I think that we could be doing a lot more with a lot less money.
Absolutely. So I'll ask one final question, and in answering this, if you have any final comments or anything that you would like to make, please do feel free. So would you please discuss how forecasted changes in industry and the labor market, such as increased automation, will affect the ability of US employers and the US government to meet the health and well-being of the US workforce?
This is a real challenge. I think we as a society have to make decisions. It's a political decision about how we want to configure ourselves as a nation. Right? So in many European countries, it is the case that there's much more cohesion. And in the US, it tends to be more the case that I take care of me and my family, you take care of you and your family, and we like it that way. So whether or not we come to a decision that what happens in early childhood are strong determinants of the way the rest of your life is going to go, and we're going to put money into prenatal and early childhood care and pre-K programs and get all kids on a trajectory where they are able to develop a skill set which, BA or no BA, is going to allow them a life with meaning. That is a political decision. I'm pretty good at being able to document kids who are raised in poorer households are unfortunately on lower health trajectories for their entire lives. I can say that, but after that, it goes to someone else, right? I mean, hopefully they can use that, but unfortunately, that is where me as a researcher, I hand it off to someone else.
Dr. Case, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an absolutely incredible lecture. I'd like to thank all of the ESIs for their lectures as well. A very virtual round of applause for everyone. This was a wonderful day. Dr. Riley, would you like to wrap things up for us today?
I would. Thank you, Erica. And Anne, thank you again for your presentation today. I have to say, I had never thought about employee-sponsored or employer-sponsored health insurance as essentially a regressive tax, which is, I think, what you sort of explained it as, which is a really nice sort of reframe of that and the fixed costs associated with it. So that, among many things that I learned today from your lecture, so much appreciated. And also great to add you to the mutual list of heroes that we have as the Matilda White Riley Distinguished Lecturers. So I'm glad to have you as part of that group. I also want to just note, we've been doing the early stage investigator paper awards for 5 or 6 years. And when we started this, one of the ways people thought about us doing this was, let's have the distinguished lecturer go first. They're busy, they have a lot going on in their lives, so that they can drop off while the early stage investigators present. And we did it in the opposite direction. And I've been really happy that we've done it that way, because you and every other distinguished lecturer we've had has said how inspiring it is to hear from our early stage investigators and the work that they're doing. And that's just go ahead, Ann. Yeah.
No, I was going to say it's extraordinary. And these are very varied research paths, right? But all of them incredibly valuable. And, I think I can't speak for them, but I am just so grateful that the NIH sees the importance of behavioral and social science research and decides that, if we're going to be a healthy and well society, this is something we might want to invest in. So I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And thank you again. I also want to thank our early stage investigators, who I know were also inspired in the opposite direction by your presentation as well. So I want to thank all of you who have attended. We had a really nice attendance today, even though it was virtual. Thanks again to Erica Spotts and the selection committee for the distinguished lecture selection, and also for Bill Elwood and all the many people who reviewed hundreds of paper submissions to select our early stage investigator paper awardees. So that will close us for this year's honors selection and honors day. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Stay well.
You too.